So to better understand what a histogram is, let's compare and contrast a histogram to a bar chart, which looks very similar. So on the left-hand side, we've got a column for bar chart information, and on the right-hand side, I've got information for a histogram. So for example, let's look at the differences in the data. Now in a bar chart, the data will have categories, and to go along with those categories, we'll have quantitative data to go with those categories. But notice with a histogram, you don't have categories. All you have is quantitative data. So for example, if the random variable I just put as L, which stands for length of grains in iron oxide powder, that is something in a microscope image that you measure. And so this represents the datums in this data set. So each datum here is a decimal number. So this is a quantitative variable. So compare the contents of this data for a histogram versus the data for a bar chart. Scroll down. So kind of what I just said, a bar chart is composed of categorical data types. The number of bars is going to be equal to the number of categories. So up above, we had categories 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to stand for Asian, African, Latino, Native American, white, and other. And you can see here, we have a bar for each one of those races or ethnicities. And each bar, notice in a bar chart, does not share boundaries. So there is a gap here between each of the bars. All right, so those are some distinguishing features of a bar chart. Whereas over here on the right-hand side, we have a histogram, and a histogram is made of numerical data, but the number of bars depends on the data. Okay, so the number of bars or classes in a histogram will depend on the size of the data. Let's go back up. So it will depend on the size of the data. And notice also in a histogram that each bar does share boundaries. So there isn't a gap here between each of these bars. Okay. So the question is, how many bars should there be? You know, how many of these should you have? And the answer is variable K, which stands for the number of classes. So we're going to end up calculating that. And then how wide should the bars be? So how wide should each bar be? And we're going to use variable lowercase w for that to represent class width. And this you will also calculate. And then the third question is, where should the bars start on the x-axis? So where is this starting point? Here it's 0, and that little dot is kind of shifting on me. But here the first bar, the first class, is starting right here at x equals 0. But it could start really in any place.